holy. I think the ladies will agree to the following statement when I say, in my opinion, one of the biggest mistakes that men often make, and especially in my case, is that we think that we know more than we really do. Is that true, Tiffany? Lisa, is that true? Taya, is that true? Men think they know more than they really do. I think that's true. And the typical case in point, the example that I want to share with you is when it comes to assembling a simple furniture, such as a bookshelf or a desk. And I hope I'm not the only one. In my case, when I buy like a bookshelf from IKEA or a desk or anything like that from IKEA, especially a bookshelf, when I see it, it's simple enough. You know what a bookshelf looks like. The long piece here, small piece like here, and the big, like board, it goes in the back. And you know the pieces for the shelves and the nails, and you think to yourself, how hard can it be? And so it comes with this direction, and I hate those directions that comes in IKEA, because it comes in like 4 different languages, and the fonts are like this small, so who needs those directions? So using my manly know-how, the gift that God's given to all men, where we can construct things without looking at instruction. So I put them all together, and it looks good. It looks good and everything. And I'm hoping that I'm not the only one, but I'm hoping it's happened to every one of us at one point or another, that we come to almost the last piece of the furniture, the desk or whatever, or the bookshelf, and you realize it doesn't fit. And it doesn't fit. Something's in the way. And you think to yourself, what's wrong? And you're like, oh, this is getting in the way. And it is that point that you realize in order to make the last piece fit, you have to disassemble the whole thing and then put it back together again. That's happened to me about at least 2, maybe 3 times. I'm not going to ask if that has happened to any one of you, because I don't want to be the only one to raise my hand. Only if I had followed the directions given to me by the Maker. This is also often the case with our relationship with God. Who knows better about how we work and how we function better than our Maker, our Creator, our God? Think about it. And yet we ignore His basic instructions, thinking really oftentimes that we know better, that we know more than God. We don't come out and say it, but we act that way. Until it's too late, and sometimes we pay a heavy price because of it. And I've learned long time ago to always obey God and what the Bible teaches. Even if I may not understand everything and why, I've learned to trust Him fully. Because in my mind and in my heart, I've come to realize that God knows best. Again, today is part 4 of the 5-part series on the 5 commandments. And we're going to examine the 4th commandment, you shall keep the Sabbath day holy. Again, it is a commandment from God. And we may wonder, why is it so important? I don't get it. Hopefully by the end of this message, we will all get it. From the very beginning of creation, God has given us an outline as to how we are to live our lives. One of them is about work and rest. And that's in the fill in the blank. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 through 11, God clearly outlined to us the work for us to work for how many days? 6 days, and to rest on the 7th day. Let me read it to you. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And on it you shall not do any work, you, your son, and so on and so on. Just so you know, just for your information, Sunday is not the Sabbath. Okay? The actual Sabbath day is Saturday. From sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, that's the actual Sabbath, the day of rest. It was only after the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, Christians decided to honor God by worshiping Jesus Christ on Sunday, the Resurrection Sunday. Now, to me, which day we rest, to me, isn't really that big of an issue. I don't think God could care less. whether we rest on the last day of the week or the first day of the week. The key thing for us, the principle here, is that we are to set aside a day to rest and keep it holy. Trivia question. If anybody can guess this right, I'll be very, very impressed. I did some research about which country, on the average, works the most hours in a week and which country works the least amount of hours in a week. Anybody, again, this is not a rhetorical question, I'm wondering, anybody know which country works the least amount of hours per week on the average? Anybody want to take a guess?
America.
No. France, you're getting close.
Spain.
Not Spain. No. Okay, we're going to name all the countries on the globe. Who said Germany? Germany, my God, son takes after the father. So it's Germany. Did you know they work on the average 28 hours a week? I want to move to Germany. 28 hours a week. This actually surprised me too. Actually, Germany didn't surprise me. They're very efficient. Do you know which country is the worst as far as working the longest hours in a week? No. This surprised me. This actually surprised me. I would have never guessed. No, not U.S. U.S. could be it. Not Korea. That would have been a good guess. Which country works the most? Not Japan. You would think it's in Asia, right? It's not.
Mexico.
It's Mexico. My goodness. I would have never guessed Mexico. I would have never guessed, Latin American people, fiesta. They work the most hours in a week. They average 70 hours. This part, do you know where Korea ranks? And I'm bringing that up because of my first-hand experience. Korea ranks number 3, where people work the most hours in a week. They're also close to 70 hours. In order for you to work 70 hours a week in Korea, you pretty much have to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It sounds unbelievable to work 12 hours a day for 6 days a week, except it's true because I've witnessed it firsthand. I lived in Korea for past 8 years, out of 13. I've seen people leave their home around 7 or 8, and they don't come back home from work until 9 or 10. It's true. It is one of the worst things. And just 2 years ago, Korea elected a new president. And the new administration in Korea is trying to tackle this problem. He's saying, my people in this, our country, the president was saying that, they're not happy. They're not enjoying life. Korea has one of the lowest index of happiness. I don't know how you measure happiness, but they say Korea is has the lowest index of happiness. And the president wants to change that. So the new administration implemented a new mandate. And the new mandate is that companies can no longer make their employees work for more than 48 hours a week. What is the purpose of this? The president is trying to achieve this goal of trying to have people work, instead of working 6 days a week, he wants the people to work 5 days a week. And instead of working 12 hours a day, he wants the people to work 8 or 9 hours a day. Now, is this going to work? Will this improve the quality of life for the citizens of Korea? The answer to that is we don't know yet. He's in the process of implementing it. But what I want to share with you is what the Bible says, what the Bible teaches, and what the Bible says is about, what's going to improve the lives of us, our lives. Now, I agree with the philosophy of reducing the daily working hours to 8 or 9 hours. Why? Because I believe God knows best. In my opinion, we are supposed to work in a time that God has granted us to work. When did God want us to work? God wants us to work during the daytime. I always say this, you work during the day and you rest and sleep at night. Now, it may vary based upon, different season, but God intends for us to work during the day and sleep at night. That means that we need to be home before dark, ready to eat. So I support this mandate, the intent of the president trying to shorten the working hours so that the people can go home by 7 or 8 o'clock so they can eat and sleep with their family. Again, that's what I believe God intends and God knows best. Now, what I don't necessarily agree, and it's not a big deal, is that the idea of shortening the work week to 5 days is really necessary. And again, the reason I say that is because, to me, Bible clearly states that we're to work 6 days. I don't think working 6 days a week is going to kill anybody, because I believe that is the intent of the Bible. We're to work 6 days and rest 1 day, and that is sufficient. Did you know that the 5-day work week really didn't come about because people were dying of exhaustion from working 6-day work week? The 5-day work week actually came about in 1908 in the United States. And when this company called the New England Cotton Mill, they decided to rest on Saturday, give their workers Saturday because of their Jewish employees. Because the Jewish people, as I mentioned earlier, their day of rest, and they're very, very, strict about their belief. Their day of rest is Saturday. So to appease the Jewish employees, they decided to have their employees rest on Saturday as well as Sunday. And that's where the 5-day work week actually originated. Again, so I don't necessarily agree with the notion that shortening a 6-day work week to 5 will make things better for people's lives, because God knows best. And even when I look around here, most people that I know here work 6 days a week. But before I continue, it is very important to note that there's actually there are 2 types of rest. Let me go back here. So then, what is the solution to improving the quality of our lives? Is it having 1 day of rest, 2 days of rest? To me, the real issue, the bigger issue is not that we don't have enough time to rest. Because in my opinion, I think we do. I think most people in the United States, we do have enough time to rest. The real issue is not that we don't have time to rest, but rather, the real issue is that we don't know what it means to rest. We don't know how to rest properly. Before I continue, it's very important to note that there are 2 types of rest that I'm talking about. One is a physical rest, and the other is the rest of the soul. Resting of the soul. For this sermon, I was reading a lot of articles and research that people have done, and almost every one of them shows that our productivity increases when we work with rest rather than without rest. I think most of you guys would agree. This is almost a no-brainer. In the long run, our productivity increases with regular rest than without. It has been proven over and over again. It's like the old story that I heard a long time ago about a lumberjack. I think some of you probably have heard this before, who worked tirelessly without rest. But one day he was called in by his supervisor and was informed by his supervisor that he was letting him go. And the reason for that was because he said, your productivity is much lower than that of other lumberjacks. So this lumberjack, after being told that he's being fired and because of his low productivity, he responded, how can that be? Because he told him, while other people rested, I worked tirelessly without rest. You see, this was the problem for the lumberjack, that he neglected the most important thing for his work, for his productivity, and that was his axe. He never took time to sharpen his axe. We human beings, we're the same. We need a day of rest to sharpen our axe, to sharpen our body, our health, well as our mind. In 2003, Judith Shulevitz, I put her name there because you can actually look her up and read the article. She's a writer for New York Times, and in 2003 she wrote an article entitled Bring Back the Sabbath. It's a very interesting article. Judith Shulevitz, she's a Jew. She grew up in an Orthodox Jewish community, attending synagogue and obeying the Sabbath, but then she got burned out by this legalistic if you really know about the Jewish community, they outline for you detail by detail what you're supposed to do on Sabbath and what you shouldn't do. And she felt suffocated and she was getting worn out, so she left. But then years later, she discovered the true meaning of Sabbath and how important it was. And it's a very, very interesting article. And in this article, she talks about how we have forgotten the vital role Sabbath has in the health of our lives. It's not an easy read. I had to read it like 3-4 times to fully understand what it meant, but it's very thought-provoking. And in my opinion, in the article, she basically talks about the importance of Sabbath, which she attributes to literally saving her life. She talked about how we live in a society where workaholism is now a norm. In her article, she implies that many of us experience some sort of mental disorder because we're so consumed by the drive to make money and the drive to succeed. Yet we don't realize it because, guess what? Everyone else is doing the exact same thing. In this article, she talks about an inner disorder this way. She says, and these are her words. She says, my mood would darken until Friday. She would just, whole week, her mood would darken. And by Saturday afternoon, I'd be unresponsive, morose. My normal routine, which involved brunch with friends, swapping tales of misadventure in the relentless quest for romance, and personal success, all made me feel impossibly restless. In other words, this disorder or anxiety or depression or whatever you want to call it is killing us softly. And no amount of lunch dates or movies or sports or vacation will bring relief. The relentlessness to succeed, relentlessness to achieve, relentlessness to make money, relentlessness to receive recognition, because that never goes away. And I found this to be so true because I've experienced the same thing in my own life, even as a pastor. One of the biggest misconceptions we have is the notion that the main cause of the problem of our fatigue is due to overwork. Now, that's partly true. But according to Judith, and I agree with her, that's just not true. The bigger problem lies with the fact that we haven't figured out how to find true rest, which is Sabbath. The literal definition of the word Sabbath is rest. It's rest. Again, quoting Judith Shulevitz, she says, and we think that, we rest on Sunday, so that should be enough. But this is what she says about typical Sunday, even for Christians. The lonely Sunday has been replaced by the overscheduled Sunday, soccer Sunday, Little League Sunday, yoga class Sunday, catch up around the house Sunday. Americans still go to church, of course, but only in between chores, supporting events, and shopping expeditions. Most people mistakenly believe that all you have to do to stop working is not work. The inventors of the Sabbath understood that it was much more complicated undertaking. You cannot downshift casually and easily, the way you might slip into bed at the end of the long day. As the Cat in the Hat says, it is fun to have fun, but you have to know how. What does it mean? What is she saying? In other words, just because we stop working does not mean that we're finding rest. And I realized, to me, it was a kick in the gut, because that's what I always assumed. That just not working means that it is finding rest. But that's not the case. So then the next logical question? What is the next logical question? Then how do we find real rest? If it's not just stop working, then how do we find real rest? The first clue can be found in the commandment in itself. It says, keep the Sabbath day, what? Holy. Oh, thank you, Justin. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Now, what is the meaning of the word holy? It means set apart. The Bible says God has commanded us, keep the Sabbath day holy. We need to keep the Sabbath day. And for us Christians, Sabbath day is Sunday. We are to keep it holy, different. It means that our Sunday has to be different. It has to be special compared to the other days, other 5 or 6 days in which work. It means, number one, To keep the Sabbath day holy, different, unique, and special, set it apart means don't do what we did the other day. What do we do the other 5-6 days? We work. If we do the same thing on Sunday that we do the other days, then we are breaking God's commandment. Keep the Sabbath day holy, separate, holy, different. So how do we do that? Again, obviously the first thing is don't work. Do something different. Like what? The answer is go to church. That's an obvious thing that we don't normally do throughout the week on Sunday. Second is do different things that are healthy and that brings joy and pleasure to you. I'll give you some example. Again, not only go to church and worship together with other believers, but do something that you can't do during the week. Like take a walk in the park. How many people take a walk during weekdays in a park? Or take a nap in the afternoon. Oh, we can't. We don't have time to take a nap, during the week when we work. But take a nap in the afternoon, or read a good book. Most of us, we don't have time to read a good book, or maybe watch one Korean drama or show, or even meet up with good friends, because we don't have time to meet up with good friends to share our hearts and things like that. But again, I want to remind you, as I stated earlier, all of these things may help us physically find rest, but it does not bring rest to our soul, which is more important. So how do we find rest to our soul? The answer to this question can be found in Matthew 12, verse 8, where he says, listen carefully, "For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." Jesus Christ is the Lord of the Sabbath. God is the Lord of the Sabbath. Again, what is the meaning of the word Sabbath? It is rest. So let's replace the word Sabbath with the word rest. He said that means what? God is the Lord of rest. Jesus is the master of rest. Think about what this statement is saying. If you want to know how to play basketball, who do you go learn from? Me. I'm really good in basketball. I'm just kidding. You go learn from Michael Jordan. If you want to learn about, investing, who do you want to know? Actually, I talked to Pastor Lum. He's pretty good. If you want to learn more about how to, maintain your eye, you go to the master of the eye, which is Lisa right there. If you want to know about how to maintain your health, keep your health, who do you go? You go to the master of health, which is Richard right there. If you want to learn how to play cajon, who do you go to? You go to Bless, because she's the master of cajon. But if you want to find true rest, then we must go to the Master, the Lord of rest, which is God. Let me explain this a little further, and you'll get it. Do you know when people experience true rest? Do you know when we really experience true rest? Again, we used to think that, I work 5 days, I work 6 days. Oh, Sunday, I'm not working. Therefore, I am experiencing rest. That's really so not true. So how do you experience true rest? Bible is so good. Genesis 1:31, you can look at it again. And this tells us when God rested. And we can learn about how to find rest. In Genesis 1:31, it says, God saw everything that he had made. And behold, it was very good. Before that, he did creation, whatever. After the creation, he said it was good, it was good. And after everything was done, God said it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. The reason why God rested, think about this. The reason why God rested was very simple. He looked at all the work that he had done the first 6 days. And he was good. It was very good. And he was content. And he was satisfied. Only when God was content and satisfied with the work that he had done, he was able to rest. And really think about the truth in that story. You look at your lives and my lives. It doesn't matter how hard we work. When we are not satisfied in our hearts with the work that we have done, it is so difficult to find rest in our soul. Let me give you some example. For those of you who are students, when you have a big final exam the next day, can you really get a good rest the day before? It's very difficult. Why? Because you will not find a single student who says, I am 100% ready. I am 100% ready. I am 100% content with all the preparation that I have done. I'm 100% satisfied that I covered everything. Now, if you feel that way, then I guarantee that those students will get good rest the day before the exam. But most students don't find rest. Why? Because there is no content or satisfaction. And without contentment and satisfaction in our hearts, we can never truly experience rest for our soul. For those of you who are working or projects to do, when you have this work project and there's coming up and there's it's huge money, and you put your presentation all together, I guarantee you will not find rest the day before that big presentation. Why? Because you don't have contentment and your heart is not satisfied. And when there is no contentment and satisfaction, your soul cannot find rest. Even for pastors, Pastor Long and I, we do not find rest on Saturday. Why? Because we have to preach on Sunday, and honestly, we're never content and satisfied. I'm sure Pastor Long is the same as my routine. I go through my sermon Saturday morning, Saturday night, and Sunday morning, and I pray there 5 minutes before. My soul will never find rest as long as if it cannot find contentment and satisfaction. We may be able to sleep, but we're not experiencing true rest or Sabbath. So think about how often, you feel contentment and satisfaction with your work or with your lives. The reality is, for most of us, we never feel contentment or satisfaction. Why? Because for us, as human nature, we want more and we always need more. This is precisely the reason why the only way we can find true rest for our soul is in God, and I'll explain this further. We can never find contentment and satisfaction on our own. We find contentment and satisfaction only when we know, and this is the only way, when we know that God is content and satisfied with us. And that comes in our worship as we realize that God accepts us despite our imperfections. And this realization, and only this realization, brings us rest for our soul. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all who labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." God says, I can give you rest. And when you think about it, we're never content, satisfied with our work situation. How many of us are satisfied with our work situation? How many of us are satisfied with our income? How many of us are satisfied with our family situation, our health situation? There will always be something, and our hearts will never be content and satisfied. The only satisfaction and contentment comes when we give our burden up to God, knowing that He is the only being that is in full control of everything. And only when we realize that God is in control over our lives, we can find some resemblance of contentment and satisfaction. Rest for our soul. That's the only way we can experience the true Sabbath. When I first read Judith Shulowitz's article, honestly, I liked it because I really related to what she was saying. Maybe more so because I am one of those people that always worries. I worry a lot. Thank God I've gotten better because of God, because I've learned to find Sabbath. And even in some ways, I'm a perfectionist. I'm not perfectionist in the sense that I do everything perfectly. That's not what I mean. In some ways, I'm a perfectionist because I always want things to be done better. And I rarely feel satisfied or content with my work. And frankly, it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I really discovered the true meaning of Sabbath. It wasn't my day off on Monday. For pastors, our Sunday is not our Sabbath. Small congregation here and working with Pastor Long really helps, but typical pastor's Sunday schedule is a 12, 14-hour day. And our rest day is Monday. And I used to think, as long as I rest on Monday, then I'm experiencing Sabbath. And I've come to realize that I wasn't experiencing Sabbath. Because even on my day of rest, I was experiencing anxiety, stress, and discontent. But it was around that time I realized deep inside why that was the case. Because I saw myself and I realized that even though I was a Christian and even though I was a pastor, even though I wanted to obey God, there was still a big part of me whose longing and desire was to succeed before my family and my peers. And there was this great desire to be recognized for being a good pastor with my peers. And it was only when I realized that it did not matter if I was a successful pastor of a large church or well known or acknowledged by others. It was only then I began to experience true Sabbath. That the only thing that mattered to me was that I do my best for God, that I just do my best to obey God and follow God. And know that when I do those things, no matter the outcome, no matter my situation and no matter my place, that God is pleased, that God is content, that God is satisfied with me. And frankly, if not for this realization, if not for this Sabbath in my life, I will not be a happy pastor of Forgiven Life today. Think about it. I'm able to be a pastor of Forgiven Life today because I am content and satisfied because I know God is content and satisfied with my life. I don't need to prove to anybody else that I have to be a pastor of a large congregation. I don't need to prove to anybody else that I need to be recognized, that I'm a good pastor with anybody else other than God. I am content, just simply pleasing God. I have learned to find true rest true Sabbath on Sundays. Because Sunday's a day I'm not bombarded with work like I am other 6 days, or I'm not fighting through traffic like I am other 6 days, or giving rides to my kids and all throughout the evening. And I find Sabbath on Sundays because unlike most days, I can sleep in a little bit. Beginning this Wednesday, I have to do the 6 a.m. wake up to give ride, prepare breakfast and give rides to the kids. But on Sunday, I can get a little bit extra sleep. And I can find my Sabbath on Sundays because I can, if I need to, take a little nap in the afternoon, if I need it. And I found my Sabbath on Sunday because unlike any other day, I can meet with other believers at church at Forgiven Life and be encouraged by the company that I have, be led to worship by the worship team, and be inspired by the Word of God that is being shared, where I'm reminded that I don't need to be perfect, that I don't need to succeed, that I don't need to be recognized, that all I have to do is simply obey God and follow God, and by doing so, God is content and satisfied with me. And it is only that realization that brings me Sabbath. I don't consider myself to be a very legalistic person, but there's one thing that I am very legalistic about, and that is keeping the Sabbath day holy. I have promised myself a long time ago that I will never miss Sunday worship, because I know that if I miss once, there's a better chance that I'll likely miss again. And having Sabbath to me is so important. It's like food and air. Even on vacation, our families would always find a local church nearby to worship on Sundays. And if going to church doesn't present itself, in the past, our family, we would even have our own devotion and worship service in our hotel room. But Pastor Paul, but what if you're having one of those days where you're just simply overwhelmed with work. You're feeling extra tired because of busy schedule. You have some, issues and problems and stress that's just bears you down, and you just feel like staying home. Well, let me just say that it is in those moments I remind myself even more that is more the reason why I need to go to church. Because I need Sabbath. Because we all need Sabbath. And true Sabbath can be found in God. Again, God knows best. What's best for you, what's best for us. And that is why He commanded all of us to keep the Sabbath day holy. Let's pray.